everyone, it's Nicola from Pixie Hill Studio here today with a tutorial. This is not the piece that we'll be making today, but it's sort of a simplified version of this. This piece here is the original piece that I made that has all sorts of vintage jewelry and what have you. The version that we're going to make uses just these simple foldable cardboard boxes that are available at Alpha Stamps. I will provide a nice big fat supply list for you. Excuse me. And you will be using this collage sheet, which I created after watching the Sofia Coppola Marie Antoinette movie. That's sort of where I got the inspiration to do the original piece, and I could not find clouds, the type of clouds that I wanted to use. So I painted up some clouds and then scanned them in, and then thought, well, if I'm doing all this work, I might as well have a collage sheet, and if I have the collage sheet, I might as well do a project to go along with it that everyone can make. If I use a method or a technique or glue or whatever that you are not comfortable with using or doing, or have something simpler, something that works for you, by all means divert from what I am saying and do what works for you. And so we will begin. These little cardboard boxes, they arrive flattened, and you can just pop them, fold along the folds and pop them right up. They're available from Alpha Stamps, and I will provide the link to the product. The first thing that we're going to do with these, though, is to disassemble them, and all we're going to do is sort of, they're glued just along one edge. I'm just going to go right along there and pop it right open. That should be fairly easy to do. Yeah, right there. So see, not too much wear and tear, just a little bit. That's okay. I can actually tear that piece off. So I'm going to open this up, and what I'm going to do, the first step after opening the box up, is I'm going to paint the entire back side, or what will be the inside of our box, black. And I'm just using some really sort of awful excuse me, some really awful acrylic craft paint, and I actually use terrible quality paint a lot, and I prefer it. It has a sort of nice chalky finish to it, whereas really good quality acrylic paint is a bit sort of plasticky. So I'm just covering everything and making sure that it's in a nice layer and not too clumpy. You'll find that the cardboard will bend just a little bit because it's becoming moist, but don't worry about that. And don't worry about getting a bit of paint on the opposite side, which you can see I've done there. It's alright, that's going to get covered up. We just want to get a nice healthy layer of paint, some good coverage right on this. And when that is done, we just let it dry. Once my paint is dry, what I'm going to do is apply some adhesive to the other side. Now, I have used some very, very sticky adhesive spray. I've done this outside because it's very stinky. You can use white glue or whatever it is that you're comfortable with. I would maybe use a really good white tacky glue or even rubber cement if you're comfortable with that. But this happened to be what I had on hand, so that's what I'm using today. Now, your box template that you've taken apart will fit on a 12 by 12 inch sheet of scrapbook paper. Here I have some of Graphic 45's new artisan style, and this particular sheet is Patterns of the Past. And this is the side that I want to show. So I'm going to turn my sheet over, although this is beautiful. I'm choosing this, by the way, because I like the way that this color will sort of complement the sky that we're going to create. Anyway, make sure that your paper's not too thick. That is important. So I'm going to take my piece here and I'm going to lay it down. And I'm going to do this. Ugh, it is so sticky. All right. And you see I've got a little smudge there. That's okay. So, and I've got a little mess up there, and that's okay too. What I am going to do is wash my hands for 1 second. I will be right back. Okay. Whenever I glue something like this, whether, even if it's with white glue or whatever I'm using, I like to use a roller or a burnishing tool, and that just makes sure that the adhesion is, that it sticks sort of everywhere and it's nice and firm and all good. And you can see I got stuff all over the place. It's okay. We're going to fix it as long as we get a nice tight seal all over everything. What you really want to focus on is sort of the edges and corners. We want those to be nice and tightly sealed with the glue. And I can even take a sort of damp cloth and just clean that up. So I'm going to let this sit for a moment, and when that glue is nice and dry, I'm going to take a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut all the way around, and I'm going to cut out this window as well. So it's really boring to watch me cut stuff up, so I'm going to do that off camera. So I have now covered my box template. I have cut out the hole. That big glob of glue that I had there, all I did was take some sandpaper and sand that down lightly and then go over with a little bit more paint. Remember to cut in between your little spaces there, and we will need to trim these flaps a little bit because the paper is so much thicker now that we've put another layer of paper on top of it. The thing that we want to do now is to sort of score or to score the fold lines. And there's two ways that we could do this. One is with your scoreboard. If you have one. This is my Martha Stewart scoreboard and I love it. It's so handy. If you had told me like years ago that I would be in love with a scoreboard, I would have told you you were a liar. But anyway, no, I love my scoreboard. So I'm just sort of lining up where the score is, and I can tell because it's where these flaps are, and I'm going to give it a good press right in there. And that'll help me to fold and prevent my paper from cracking. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing here, and I'm just making sure that it's lining up. There we go. And I know there's another one here, so once again, And if you, I mean, you don't want to press it so hard that you destroy something, but you know, I mean, a good firm push is all you need. And then I'm just right at that thing. And one last one here. And I'm just like ever so slightly moving the paper. If it doesn't meet exactly one of these little grooves, I'm just moving it really, really slightly just to get it in just the right position. Now, if you don't have a scoreboard, don't worry. All you do is take a metal ruler and a blade like this, a craft blade, and score very gently. Score the paper really, really gently. You don't want to score it enough that it will go through, just enough to give an edge to where the fold will be. And yeah, that's what I did when I was in college. That was how we got the job done. And I think I did that in the wrong spot. And I did, but that's okay. That should be where the fold is. Again, if you make a mistake, like I just did, it's no big deal. It is not the end of the world. We just plod along and do what we can to hide or camouflage or whatever. Most people won't even notice, to be honest, if you make a little bit of a boo-boo. That's okay. And we all make mistakes. So, I mean, it's really no big deal. And then I've just got my last score, which should be right about there. I hope. Okay, so now I've scored that, and I can make my folds. And when I make my folds, I'm going to use just the back of that to sort of press it down. And I am getting a little bit of cracking there. That's okay. Like this is pretty thick, so it might be unavoidable if you're using paper with any sort of heft whatsoever. But we can sand down those edges and distress them a little bit, and no one will be any the wiser that that wasn't supposed to happen. And if you, just a quick tip, I sand stuff a lot. If you ever find that your edge isn't as crisp as you like, or your measurements are off slightly, it's okay to go over and sand those edges and make them even. There is nothing that says that you cannot do that. Which is one of the nice things about crafting and art, is that there really is no correct way. So now we have all of our folds in place, and we're going to start with, I'm going to start with this top fold here, and I'm going to add a little bit of quality white glue. You could use hot glue if you like. I don't like hot glue because I burn myself like every single time I use it. But if you're comfortable with it, by all means, go ahead. This takes maybe a little bit longer to use, to dry, to set into place, but it's what I'm comfortable with, so it's what I use. So I'm just going to line that up, and I'm going to hold that in place for just a minute until it dries. So that's sort of dry. now, and I'm just folding this flap in. This flap on this side seemed to fit in fine here, so I'm just going to glue that into place. The other side, however, is a little bit big. You can see on that side it's just not quite fitting in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim a tiny bit off of this flap. And honestly, if you need to trim stuff to fit things where they're supposed to go, by all means do that. Who's gonna know once it's all together? As long as it's not a sort of in a like a huge glaring misshapen mess. I mean, go ahead, do whatever it takes. There we go. And we'll let that sort of sit, and I'll wash the glue from my fingers. All right. So, like I said before, there's a tiny bit of cracking going on there. What I'm going to do is take some sandpaper. This sand block is from my Coordinations cardstock, but you can use, you know, just whatever you like. Fine sandpaper will not be as damaging as coarse sandpaper. You'll get a sort of finer result. The coarser the sandpaper, the more it's going to tear. And all we're really doing is cleaning up these sort of edges, cleaning them up, distressing them a little bit. Another good idea is to wait until if you're using white glue especially, wait until your glue is dry, because you will have much more of a chance of tearing your paper. So after I have sort of distressed those edges, I'm going to grab my ink pads. And this is just a Stampology ink pad. It's just black, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to rub this sort of on an angle. I don't know if I can do it like this. Sort of on an angle, and just rub it against the edges. And this will kind of sort of camouflage those cracked areas, and it gives a distressed look, which I personally love and use all the time. If you don't love it so much, maybe try the scoring technique with the knife, the blade instead, which will give a much sharper edge to your folds. So I'm just doing all the edges here. When I want sort of this vignette effect, I almost go flat over the edges, and I use older ink pads because I don't want big streaky messes. I don't want it super saturated. In some areas I do, like on this corner where there's actually quite a bit of white showing through. I'm just pressing that stamp pad in there to get that nice dark sort of look, to hide those messy bits. And it's like with everything else, you sort of get a feel for your tools and what works and what doesn't. So there is that. We have a pretty good box there. It's pretty sturdy. The next thing I'm going to do is actually fix up some little bits on the inside that I can see. I have one little tab there that's sticking out. Another one there. I'm just pushing them into place because I want the inside of my box to be black. What I'm going to do is actually take a bit of black paint, and I don't know if you can see it, but on the fold where the paper meets the cardboard, I can actually see the white of that paper, and I don't want to. So what I'm going to do is take my crappy black paint and just touch that up. I'm using quite a dry brush. I'm just going inside, to fix that up. When your white edges are hidden, it really does camouflage things so much better than that. And it's these little tiny finishing touches, I think, that really make your work stand out and really sort of show a sense of quality. The next thing that I'm going to do is I do want a bit of color inside here. So I have some blue paint. I have different kinds of paint and different sort of hues or different shades of blue. And I'm just putting, I can put a little bit on the inside. That's a bit much. So maybe I'll take a little bit of that out. Let's take a bit of that out for now. I've just wet this brush a little bit. And I just want a bit of color in there. So you can use a sponge or a cloth. I actually do have cloths, which are like proper cloths that I use. I have a whole bag full of them, but just for ease sake, I'm just going to use this bit of paper towel, and I'm just sort of pouncing where that paint is. My cloth is a little bit wet, so it's sort of keeping that paint activated. This does not need to be perfect in any way, shape, or form. All I want to do is kind of highlight this middle area to give, again, that sort of vignette effect. And you can put, you know, whatever shade of blue you like. This is going to be filled up, so I mean, you don't have to spend too much time on this. We just want a little bit of a highlighted area. So a few more small elements that need to be completed. I have just some Elmer's school glue here, and I'm going to put a little bit inside. You do want something that's a little bit more, that's a little bit thinner, more liquid than perhaps your really sticky, tacky glue. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of smush this all over the place. I do not want streaks or clumps of it. I want just like a nice, thin, even layer. Now, you're really not going to see this when it's dried, but having a nice even layer will prevent things from clumping together. So that's pretty good. Now I'm going to take my glitter. This is Recollections, which, I don't know what color it is. It's Peacock. I think this is just the Michaels brand. I could be wrong. But I'm putting a fine layer. I'm using this sprinkle, the small holes here, and just sprinkling a fine layer. And I'm kind of concentrating on, I don't mind if there is a concentration of glitter in the center, but I don't want too much around the edges. And I don't want to saturate it. I don't want a complete covering of this. I just want a nice fine layer, because I want this to be my starry sky. I definitely recommend the extra fine glitter over regular glitter. I find it adheres much better. It doesn't come loose as much as the other glitter tends to, and I think the effect is much more refined than chunky glitter. I mean, chunky glitter definitely has its place. I'm a big glitter fan, but more often than not, I will use the extra fine over the regular or chunky type. While this is drying, I'm going to pull out my paint again, And for spacing out and creating depth in my clouds and my moon, I'm going to use, in part, these little squares. I will use the regular, you know, sponge spacing squares, but I want to create quite a bit of depth, so I'm just going to use these little wooden blocks, and I'm going to paint them black so that they're really not, so that they're not so obvious when they're inside. If someone happens to peek well inside my box there and to see how it's put together, this will sort of make it a little bit more camouflaged. And you only need to do the 4 sides because that bottom is going to be glued into place, and on top you're going to place either your cloud or your moon or whatever. And I'm going to do 3 of them just so that I have them in case I need them. They definitely won't go to waste. Another thing that you can use for spacing is when you have sort of chipboard, these ones have holes. There's a little bit of the drilled hole actually has a little bit of it's not smoothed down, so I'm just taking my sanding block here and just making that a nice smooth edge. Another thing that you can use to create space besides these square things is leftover chipboard. Like if you have like a sheet of tags or what have you, and those little bits that that are the outside, they're great if you have extra, whatever you need to do to get that to create that depth. Go right ahead and do it. So now those are drying. So that's another element that we have done there. We can also create our bunting. So I'm just going to take, I've used that, okay. I'm going to take this glue container and this paint container, and I've got a length of, this is just crafting, like crafting thread or crafting yarn. And I'm going to loop this around 2 sort of sturdy objects. And I'm going to pull that up kind of taut. I'm going to take my nice quality tacky glue here, and I am going to actually need to poke this because I've left the lid off too long, of course. There we go. So I'm gonna put this, you know what, I use my hands a lot. I use it to thin out my paint and whatever. I just find it really easy, and it helps me to, I don't know, I like to feel my materials. Anyway, I'm gonna put that aside. So I'm gonna take these little squares that I've cut out from my collage sheet, or sorry, these little triangles I've cut out from my collage sheet. I'm going to just scrape a tiny bit of glue onto the short edge, and I'm going to place them right onto this string. And honestly, if you're using really nice tacky glue, it should just stay right in place. And I'm going to go along all the way, continuing this, making sure that they're all facing the same direction, and I'm leaving just a tiny space in between. And this may seem a little bit fiddly, but when dried, it'll be pretty strong. I think you'll be surprised. There we go. Oops. And the nice thing about doing it this way is that then when sometimes your string or rope or yarn or whatever it is that you're using, if you do this flat, when you pick it up, sometimes it twists funny. This will keep it sort of everything in the same orientation. If you need to help along by giving it a push, and you can use whatever you want. You could use fishing line or thread or yarn, anything you want. When I'm placing it, I'm kind of giving it a little bit of a wobble, a wiggle, just to sort of get that glue right in there. And you can see that by putting this glue on my hand, it's actually, I think it's really handy. Some people may not like it, but I mean, it's not moving around. It's nice, thick glue. And it's awfully handy to have it right there where I need it. Okay, so there's my bunting. So now I'm letting my bunting dry, I'm letting my blocks dry, and I'm letting my glitter dry. I've cut out all my clouds, and I have cut out my moon shape as well. I have distressed the edges on the moon. I have not inked the edges of the clouds. I don't want to. I want that white edge to remain white. So now, once again, we wait until all this is dried. I'm going to start with the clouds, and what I'm going to do is I'm just using these sort of spongy spacer things, and in one corner I'm going to do one, I'm just putting one layer, and I'm going to shove that right into one of these corners, just like that. One of the reasons that you don't want too much glitter on the bottom of your box is that it'll make things like these little sticky tabs much harder to adhere to if you've encrusted the entire background with glitter. To create more depth for my next clouds, I'm using 2 layers of these little sticky tabs. And I think that should be okay. There we go. And then I'm going to put one over, and I'm just trying to sort of decide where things are going to go right now. That might be good. That might be good. I think I like that there better. And this is actually where a lot of my time is spent, to sort of really fiddling and trying to decide where things are going to go. I'm going to do 3 layers of my sticky things on these ones right here. And if you have another product that you prefer to use, by all means, go ahead. Really, once you start getting to about 3 layers of these, it starts getting a little bit ridiculous. So that's why I start using the blocks once it gets too high. Yeah. Okay. Oh, there goes one of my blocks. And this little cloud here, I want him to go over here, but I don't like the way that it's coming out, so I'm going to trim off that edge. If I can find my scissors, which I can't, so I'm going to trim it with this. There we go. And you know what? I mean, it is fine to chop designs up. Don't feel that that you have to use things exactly as they are. Make them fit to your need, not the other way around. Excellent. And I think I will use one of these blocks instead for that. Maybe that one. So I'm just going to put that little block right there, and a little bit of glue on top, and then shove my cloud right in there. And you'll see how great that depth looks there. And then I'm going to put my moon my moon fellow right there. Now, the thing I don't like about this placement as it is that if I put my moon there just like that, it's on the same level as this cloud, and I don't like that. So I am going to add a couple of these sponge doohickers too, just to give me that little bit more oomph. There we go. And now I will place that in there. And cute as buttons. So adorable. I'm going to add a Dresden border. I love Dresden. I think it adds such a nice finished look to just about everything it's put on. It looks super fancy. It's great stuff. So I'm putting a nice bead of glue around there. And I'm just going to sort of eye how much of this I'm going to use. And you know, I do most of my measurements by eye like that rather than measuring, because I am terrible, really. I cannot measure to save my life. So by just sort of eyeballing stuff, it's a much safer way for me to get things done. Otherwise, everything looks wonky. So again, I'm doing that. I'm chopping off my Dresden there. And Dresden will be, it sort of attaches in a couple little spots just to hold everything together. And right to about there. You could definitely get extra fancy and make sure that everything's even Steven all over the place, but we're wild and crazy here, so actually I don't like that little bit because I got a little tear there. So even though we're wild and crazy, we're not that wild and crazy. Don't worry too much about your corners, because we're going to add stuff there too to make it nice and pretty and finished. Just make sure it's all kind of in place. So at this point you can really do whatever you want to sort of finish off those corners. In my original inspiration piece, I had used some old vintage earrings. It might be difficult to come by, you know, a pair of vintage earrings that you want to rip up or whatever. So I use buttons a lot in my work. They're easy to come by. So you can use buttons. I have these amazing stars which are made out of plastic, but they look like rusty tin, and they're really kind of cool, and I kind of like those. And the other thing that I use a lot, that I'm constantly sort of replenishing my stash with, are these little hands, and I kind of love them too. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to use. I think that I may use these stars and then a couple of buttons. These stars, they do come with this little loop, and I don't want that there, so I am just going to chop that right off. Now, in chopping that off, I can see the material that it's made from underneath. So all I'm going to do is take my ink pad and sort of dab it so that it's camouflaged. So much of what I do to give things a finished look really is just sort of camouflaging and hiding and, you know, making things work. You know, forcing them to do my bidding. Okay, so I'm gonna put these two little doodads right there. And what I'm going to do is actually put my bunting across here and then apply my stars to that. So let me grab that. And here it is. Not quite dry, but I think it'll survive. And this will be too long, I think, for my piece, but if I stick that into place and then sort of guess, oh, maybe that one too, so that when that sits up, is that hanging nicely? And it's not, because that's way too far over. So if I move it over one more, so again, I'm a huge cheat. I sort of eyeball and guesstimate everything. And I happen to think that's okay. So, oops, get that right in there. And you'll find with your bunting, you gotta really sort of give it a jiggle and see how it hangs. I think that's okay. And now, maybe my stars there. I have found my little sentiment and I have glued that to the bottom of my box there with just a little bit of white glue. I know I said that I do not like hot glue, and I don't, but really for this part it is the easiest thing to use. What I'm going to do is apply this little bit of wire so that the box can hang. And I'm going to do that by adding a tiny bit of glue to the side, then attaching the wire to that. One thing you will have to be careful of when using hot glue with this this wire with the stars on it, if you get the hot glue near these stars, they will melt. Well, I suppose depending on how hot your hot glue gun is, but they're pretty sensitive. So just something to be careful of. And I'm just adding a nice little button to the side here, and that just gives it, you know, it's a nicer look than just the end of the wire. And I'm going to do the same to this side. A tiny bit of glue. Place my wire right there. I can move this little star out the way. Come on, buddy. Go. Oops. And then a spot of glue for my final button. And that is, as soon as I get rid of all these little stringy bits, and that is really it.